A rocket explosion. More rocket explosions. SpaceX will destroy the International Space Station, and because of that, the Russians will replace the International Space Station. All coming up on the next Orbital Edge. Hello and welcome to Orbital Edge News, a brand new show for passionate spaceflight fans. I'm your host Chad, and let's get on to some launches. We got the H3 from Japan. Kicking off the long list of launches is the majestic H3 rocket by Japan. This launch occurred on July 1st, 2024 at 3:06 UTC. This JAXA mission will observe the Earth's surface using onboard phased array L-band radars. Next up is a launch from China with its Long March 7A. Here comes the mighty Long March 7A. This rocket has 4 solid boosters and has a 3rd stage, which makes this the 7A variant over the Long March 7. This is carrying the Zhongxing 3A communication satellite from the Wenchang spacecraft launch site in Hainan Province, China on June 29th, 2024 at 11:57 Universal Coordinated Time. And of course, we got a Falcon 9 launch, and this one is from your West Coast spaceport.
3, 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff Falcon 9, go spaceflight, go NROL 186.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
This mission carries the NROL 186 mission by the National Reconnaissance Office. This launch occurred on June 28, 2024 at 3:14 UTC. This classified payload is rumored to support critical space-age intelligence and surveillance to the nation. Next up is the Falcon Heavy, and we're going to roll our footage first. And you can see the Starship Tower coming to fruition here with the new strobe lights. And we're going to throw in some fan footage here. This launch occurred on June 25th, 2024 at 5:26 Eastern Daylight Time. This mission's payload is the GOES-U weather satellite. This state-of-the-art satellite offers better weather data collection and faster reporting to ground stations, warning of its impending doom. Credit goes to Kitchen1066 on Twitter, and this is a first where we're going to start showing some fan footage of some of our launch coverages. Next, we're going to save the best for last. China explosions! This is going to be from the Tianlong 3 rocket, which, this is hilarious. This launch was an accidental launch. It was supposed to be a static fire. Now, as crazy as this sounds, the rocket comes back down here, and you can see all this toxic fuel coming and hailing down to everybody who lives below. By the way, don't go near this thing. This is the most toxic fuel known to man used on rocketry. Now, the reason why this happened is the pad was rated for about 600 tons of thrust, but the rocket engines ended up boasting about 800 tons of thrust. And this rocket is a clone of the Falcon 9. It has 9 engines, grid fins, landing legs, and this is going to be their attempt at reusability. And again, this is the Tianlong 3. There was a Tianlong 2 that we covered on the show a few months back. So, with that said, we're going to move on to some leaked exclusive footage of this incident. That will do it for launches this week. Let's move on to some space news. SpaceX has recently announced that it won a $943 million award to deorbit the International Space Station. A hard date has not been set yet, but Russia's not screwing around here. Here we've seen some photos surfacing of a few modules that will lead the first parts of the new Russian space station, which of course will replace the International Space Station. Now we got a Starliner update. This is everybody's favorite. Our update is that the spacecraft, it has a lot of thruster issues. It's docked to the International Space Station. They've shut down the leaks, apparently. I don't know if that means anything because I don't know a whole lot about spacecraft myself. Just because you turn off valves doesn't mean a leak can appear somewhere else. So they're testing a mock thruster configuration that mirrors the in-orbit configuration of the Starliner spacecraft, which is, of course, 5 working thrusters, which are also known as the reaction control systems. What these do is they orientate the spacecraft in orbit to do either lateral motions or roll control or yaw. I hope I got that right. The decision comes in part of confirming that only 5 working thrusters remain after the helium leaks were progressively discovered over the course of the entire mission. Now for some really cool news that I learned about today. The Ariane 6 is actually scheduled to launch July 9th this week at about 2 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. They got a 4-hour window here. It's going to carry a couple of re-entry capsules along with several other satellites, which will be deployed over 3 separate periods. Following satellite deployment, the upper stage will perform a deorbit burn to help it prevent orbital debris. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the main topic of the show, China. What's up with that? Stay tuned and don't go away. Welcome back. We're in Max Q, which means that's the topic of the show. Is China beating us in space? Well, the last few weeks have been exploding in space news. I mean, literally. The spaceflight programs in China have definitely been giving us popcorn-worthy entertainment. So, without further ado, let's talk about the bad first, and then we'll move on to the groundbreaking things that China has done recently in space. The crashy, exploding events show that spaceflight is hard. Remember that nations have different laws. Spaceflight laws governing China are contextually related to the US. Compromises of the launch site in respect to the ocean had to be made since the development of the pads happened during a time of less strict safety requirements. But I think they should have used less toxic fuels. I mean, hypergolic fuels are bleh. They stink, they smell like fish, and if you're ever near any of that stuff, just get away from it. So an alternative to that type of fuel would be something like liquid hydrogen, and this would help a little bit with those compromises. If you are new here, you may have watched us cover China launches all the time during our launch segment, and the reason we do this is we have to stay objective in our spaceflight coverage to diversify everything that we do. We don't want to just focus on one launcher. We're not going to just cover Falcon 9 over and over and over and over and over again, because if we do that, we lose our engagement and we lose our audience. And nobody wins here, and it doesn't get anybody excited for space, which is our main goal here. Which, of course, is why we've designed the show the way we did to deliver a diversity portfolio of launches and high-profile missions. This way, this will capture the best part that the algorithm on YouTube can get our videos out in front of the proper audience. So what has China done that has been really good for space? The CNSA also, of course, is the China National Space Administration. They're really kicking our butts in space, right? Well, here's why. They had a recent mission called Chang'e 6. This mission was the first to ever successfully retrieve lunar samples from the dark side or the far side of the moon, which of course never faces Earth. And the reason this side never faces Earth is because the moon is tidally locked to the planet Earth. And if you still don't get it, it just means that the moon doesn't rotate on its axis. It actually follows, if this hand is the Earth and this is the moon, and it rotates around the orbit, around this orbital plane like that, that's what tidally locked means. Now, the mission was the first to also go to the South Pole, called the Aitken Basin, which is the moon's oldest and deepest impact crater. So the lander came back to Earth with approximately 1 kilograms of rock and dust, and soil too. China has now made it to the moon several times successfully in the past 5 years, and NASA has yet to put anything on the moon since the early 1970s. Now, there has been a couple private launch attempts to do so, like Intuitive Machines' Nova C lander and the Astrobotics, but the Astrobotics, of course, didn't make it to the moon, and Nova C lander, if I recall, we covered that in the show where that lander had tipped over on its side. Also, Japan has made their attempt to land something, and that was, what the heck was that called? Somebody in the comments let me know what that mission was actually called. It happened like 4 months ago. We covered it in the show. That lander was supposed to land on its side it's supposed to tip over on purpose, but that even failed. So, kind of hilarious in a sense, but not really, because nobody likes failure and that's expensive. So we're going to take another break, and when we come back, comments from the internet from you guys. Stay tuned, don't go away. Welcome back. We'd like to thank all the subscribers and collaborators that help make this show engaging. With that said, we are in orbit, and let's get into the first comment. And this first one comes from Brian Basson from Twitter. So what exactly is going on? NASA and Boeing say that Starliner is fully capable of bringing Williams and Wilmer back to Earth in case of an emergency. They say they want to keep Starliner in space for as long as they can do better, and analyze a series of helium leaks and issues with the vehicle's thrusters, tiny engines that the Starliner uses to maneuver through space, that they don't fully understand at the moment. That scares the crap out of me, with what was said there, and also the whole fact that they are testing thruster configurations at White Sands reminds me of the movie Apollo 13, where something's happening in space and they've got to simulate that problem down here on Earth. You know that's not good when they're doing something like that. So I agree with the comment. It is just a horrible thing. I wish that the Starliner was a perfect spacecraft, because I'd have a lot more confidence in Boeing and the direction that the space program is going. We're going to move on to the next comment, and this is from Andrew McCarthy from Twitter. And this is actually just an image that I saw off of Twitter, and I thought I'd share with you guys here on Orbital Edge News, because this photo right here is pretty damn awesome. This right here, this photo, it hits me really hard because it gives you this positioning and this feeling of not only the loneliness, but also the feeling of like point A to point B. Like there's some sort of distance there. And not only this photo will get people interested in space that aren't interested in space or maybe even barely interested in space right now. But the fact that the International Space Station is just right in front of the moon, it's in two parts. You've got the space station, and then you've got like the planetary stuff, and it's both in the same frame. This is really what's going to captivate people. And I'm glad that I got permission from Andrew to show this to you guys. I really hope you enjoy it, and it gives you this awesome feeling that what would it be like to be, traveling in a spacecraft to that space station with the moon in the background. So we're going to move on to our own comment, per se, from Orbital Edge News on China and Boeing, the topic of the show today. We're going to start with Boeing. Again, I'm highly disappointed in Boeing. They should have launched when everything was ready. That's the primary argument here. I feel things were rushed, and they could have waited, and Boeing could have redeemed itself by waiting and making sure all the helium thrusters would, have their leaks solved. And they knew damn well that a spacecraft that sits for 2-3 years, all that plumbing in there was going to rot. And that's exactly what happened. Pipes or whatever material that stuff was made out of, it was not meant to last and just sit there under pressure. And what were they thinking? And now they've got 5 working thrusters, and then they got to work the problem, down here. So, Godspeed to Sonny and Butch that are up there. I know they'll get a ride down. There are 3 Soyuz spacecrafts right now up there. One or two of them is at least used as a lifeboat. So if they need to get down before like 90 days, because 90 days is a turnaround time that SpaceX Dragon can launch an unmanned cargo mission, but they have to wait that long for that to get up there. And one thing that's really been kind of a disappointing thing that you hear on the online, on Twitter and things like that, is everybody's go-to was to immediately launch a Dragon to save Sonny and Butch. Now, for the audience out there, I don't know how well versed you are in spaceflight logistics, but here's the thing: the research has been done. Nobody just launches something because you want them to launch something. You have to look at the actual, the present logistics. And the Soyuz spacecraft that's up there was specifically, the whole dynamics is one of them is meant to be a lifeboat. That's how the crew rotation works. So more than likely, a Soyuz will probably bring those 2 crew members down. I'm not guaranteeing that, because if they are going to wait up to 90 days, it is possible that a crew Dragon could be launched up there to bring down Sonny and Butch. But we're going to see how this plays out, and we'll, of course, probably release a space pod on any new updates on that. With that said, that does close out our comment period. So we've reached escape velocity. As you can see on the board, I do need to make a correction from what I said earlier on the show. Yes, the Ariane 6 is going to launch on July 9th. However, this episode is probably not going to come out until August 10th or 11th, so you're going to see the news late. My apologies for that. However, I'm gonna, and to make up for it, I'm gonna do a space pod on that launch. So look for that sometime in about 7-8 days time frame right now. Now, before we go, the answer to the orbital trivia is 17,500 miles per hour to get into low Earth orbit. If you enjoyed this episode, you can support us by commenting. You can also participate in our discussions on social media and on the show as well. And with that said, we will see you next time.